A man changes his Wi-Fi password and his neighbor calls 911 on him. But when the cops arrive, they uncover something far more disturbing. Ken Elm wasn't the kind of man who liked unnecessary attention. He worked from home, kept his yard neat, and only ever spoke to his neighbors when necessary. For the most part, people left him alone, which was exactly how he liked it. That was until one simple decision put him under a microscope. It all started on a Thursday afternoon in Crestwood, Missouri. Amory had just wrapped up a long morning of work and decided to take a break by checking his internet speed. Lately, his Wi-Fi had been acting up, slower than usual, buffering on video calls, lagging when he streamed music. At first, he thought it was just his provider being unreliable, but something didn't sit right with him, so he dug a little deeper. Opening up his router settings on his phone, he noticed a device connected to his network that he didn't recognize. The name wasn't just random numbers and letters. It looked like someone had intentionally labeled it Crestwood I01. That was weird. Amory lived alone. He didn't have multiple devices connected to his Wi-Fi beyond his phone, laptop, and TV. He wasn't the type to lend out his password either. So who was using his internet? Annoyed, he decided to kick every unknown device off the network and reset his password. He stepped outside for a stronger signal, leaning against the side of his house while typing in the new credentials. And that's when Audrey saw him. From her kitchen window, she spotted Amory standing in his driveway, staring at his phone, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. To her, it looked suspicious. She had never trusted him, not for any real reason, but because he never seemed interested in being part of the neighborhood. He didn't come to block parties, he barely spoke to anyone, and now here he was, standing outside, messing with something on his phone. Her mind jumped to the worst conclusion. He was hacking. She didn't know what or why, but she felt it in her gut. Something wasn't right. Before she could talk herself out of it, she grabbed her phone and dialed 911. "Yes, I need to report something suspicious. My neighbor. He's outside doing something with his phone. I don't know what it is, but it looks off. Can you send someone to check it out?" The dispatcher asked a few questions, but Melanie didn't have real answers. She just kept repeating the same thing. "He's up to something. I just know it." The police were on their way. And Amory, he had no idea his quiet afternoon was about to turn into a full-blown investigation. But what neither of them knew was that the real danger had nothing to do with Amory at all. Amory had just finished updating his Wi-Fi password when he heard the sirens. At first, he barely paid attention. Maybe they were headed somewhere else. But then he saw the squad car slow down and stop right in front of his house. Two officers stepped out. One was a tall, broad-shouldered man with sharp features, Detective Luis Navarro. His partner, Officer Belle Carter, had a more compact frame but carried herself with a quiet authority. Amory let out a slow breath. "Here we go." He didn't move from his spot as the officers approached. Navarro's hand rested near his belt, not on his gun, but close enough to send a message. "Sir," Navarro called out, voice steady. "We got a call about some suspicious activity. Mind telling us what you're doing?" Amory frowned, glancing between the officers. Suspicious activity? He was standing in his own driveway. "I'm changing my Wi-Fi password." His tone carried a hint of confusion, but he kept his voice calm. He knew how these things could escalate. Navarro exchanged a quick glance with Carter before looking back at Amory. "Do you live here?" Amory almost laughed. What kind of question was that? His car was in the driveway. His name was on the mailbox. "Yeah," he said, crossing his arms. "I've lived here for 3 years." Before Navarro could respond, a voice cut through the air. "He's lying!" Amory turned, and there she was. Audrey, standing on her porch, arms folded, watching everything like she was the neighborhood security guard. "He's always outside doing something," she continued it, "messing with his phone, looking around like he's watching people. Now he's out here standing in the same spot for 10 minutes, just tapping away." Amory couldn't believe it. Was she serious? "I was on my router settings," he said flatly, "because someone I don't know has been using my Wi-Fi." Melanie scoffed. "Oh, sure. And I'm supposed to believe that? Navarro turned to her. Mum, do you have any evidence that Mr. Coleman has done something illegal? Melanie hesitated because, of course, she didn't. She just had a bad feeling. I don't know, she admitted. I just think you should check. Navarro exhaled, his patience thinning. He turned back to Amory. Sir, would you mind if we take a quick look at your router settings, just to clear this up? Amory clenched his jaw. He shouldn't have to prove anything, but he also knew how these situations could spiral out of control. Fine, he muttered, unlocking his phone and pulling up the settings. Here, take a look. Navarro leaned in, eyes scanning the list of connected devices. And that's when his expression changed. Because there it was, Crestwood IO1. Who owns that device? Navarro asked. Amory shook his head. Not me. Officer Carter stepped in, eyebrows raised. So someone's been using your Wi-Fi without permission? Amory nodded. And I don't think they were just stealing internet. Look at the connection logs. It's been running non-stop. Someone's been watching. Navarro's posture shifted. This wasn't just a petty neighbor dispute anymore. Melanie, still standing on her porch, suddenly looked uncomfortable. Wait, what do you mean, watching? Amory turned to her, eyes cold. I mean, someone has been spying, and they might be watching all of us. But the real question was, who? Silence settled over the front yard. The weight of Amory's words hung in the air. Melanie, who had been so sure she was the one in the right, suddenly looked uneasy. Spying? That wasn't what she expected to hear. Navarro straightened up. All right, he said, his voice more serious now. Let's get inside. I want to see exactly what we're dealing with. Amory didn't argue. He led the officers into his house, his frustration simmering just below the surface. He hadn't done anything wrong, yet here he was, being treated like a suspect in his own home. Melanie hesitated before following. She wasn't sure why, but something told her she needed to hear this. Once inside, Amory placed his phone on the dining table and mirrored the router settings onto his laptop screen. The device list appeared. There it was again, Crestwood ISO-1, still connected, still active. Officer Carter leaned in, scanning the details. Can you see what kind of device this is? Amory clicked around, his fingers moving fast. I can't tell exactly, but he opened the activity logs and froze. Navarro noticed the shift in his face. What is it? Amory's throat went dry. It's been accessing camera feeds. The room went dead quiet. Melanie blinked. I don't understand. What camera feeds? Amory's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Mine. He turned the laptop around. My home security cameras. Someone's been logging in and watching my live feeds. Carter's expression tightened. You're saying someone has been spying on you through your own security system. Amory exhaled sharply. That's exactly what I'm saying. But then his stomach dropped. Because the more he scrolled, the more he realized. It wasn't just his cameras. His system had flagged multiple IP addresses. Some of them belonged to his network, but others, different homes. Oh, this is bad, Amory murmured. Navarro leaned closer. What do you mean? Amory tapped the screen. Whoever this is, they're not just watching me, they're watching other people in the neighborhood. Melanie took a step back, shaking her head. No, that can't be right. Amory turned to her. You sure about that? He clicked another log. A new feed opened, a dimly lit hallway appeared, then a living room, then a bedroom. Melanie gasped. Wait, that's… Amory didn't even have to ask. He recognized it immediately. It was her house. She stumbled backward, pressing a hand to her mouth. Navarro's voice was sharp. How the hell is this happening? Amory gritted his teeth. If I had to guess, someone in the neighborhood set up a fake network. A Wi-Fi signal that looks like a normal connection. People unknowingly connect to it, and once they do, their devices get compromised. Carter's face darkened. You mean a man-in-the-middle attack? Amory nodded. Exactly. Melanie's voice shook. So you're saying someone's been, what? Watching me, my family? Amory's eyes didn't leave hers. That's exactly what I'm saying. She sank into a chair, her hands trembling. Oh my God! Navarro's jaw tightened. All right, we need to figure out who's behind this, and fast. But what none of them knew was that the person responsible was a lot closer than they thought. Detective Navarro wasted no time. He pulled out his radio and called in for cybercrime support. This is bigger than we thought, he muttered to Officer Carter. If someone's running a surveillance network, they're not just invading privacy, they're committing a felony. Carter nodded, her expression serious. And if we don't stop them now, who knows how far they've already gone? Amory, still seated at his laptop, was already digging deeper. He wasn't a hacker, but he knew enough about network security to trace where the data was being sent. He opened the IP logs and froze. Wait, this can't be right. Navarro looked up. What? Amory turned the laptop screen so they could see. The data isn't going to some random server. It's being sent to an address right here in the neighborhood. Melanie's eyes widened. You mean someone close by is behind this? Amory nodded. It's coming from a house just a few doors down. Navarro's expression darkened. Can you pinpoint exactly which one? Amory worked fast, cross-referencing connection timestamps with signal strength. Within minutes, he had a match. His stomach dropped. He recognized the address. Melanie did too. No, she whispered, shaking her head. That's... Amory cut her off, his voice cold. That's Brandon's house. Brandon Foster, Melanie's own nephew, a 22-year-old college student who had moved in with her a few months ago. He was quiet, always on his computer, barely socialized. Now, suddenly, things were making a whole lot of sense. Melanie's face went pale. No, that doesn't make any sense. Brandon isn't... He wouldn't... Carter stepped in. We need to talk to him, now. Melanie hesitated. She didn't want to believe it. But deep down, something in her gut told her it was true. I'll take you to him, she murmured. Amory stood. I'm coming too. Navarro gave him a sharp look. No, you stay here. Let us handle this. Amory clenched his jaw. He hated sitting back when he was the one who uncovered everything, but he also knew pushing back wouldn't help. Fine, he muttered, but you'd better get the truth out of him. But the truth? It was even worse than they imagined. Brandon, can you come downstairs for a minute? No answer. Navarro exchanged a look with Carter before stepping inside. We're going up. Melanie didn't argue. She just wrapped her arms around herself, her breath unsteady. They climbed the stairs, reaching Brandon's bedroom door. It was shut. No sounds inside. Navarro knocked hard. Brandon, this is the police. We need to talk. Still nothing. Then the sound of movement. A chair scraping. Footsteps. Carter's hand hovered over her gun. Open the door, now. Slowly, the knob turned. The door creaked open, revealing Brandon Foster. He looked startled, nervous, eyes darting between Navarro, Carter, and his aunt. His hands fidgeted at his sides. What's going on? He asked, voice tight. Navarro studied him. We have reason to believe you've been accessing private security cameras in the neighborhood. You want to explain that? Brandon's face barely flinched, but his fingers curled slightly, like he was gripping something invisible. What? That's crazy, he scoffed. I don't know what you're talking about. Carter wasn't buying it. Mind if we check your laptop? His jaw tightened. You don't have a warrant. Navarro stepped closer. Brandon, we can get one, but right now we're giving you a chance to tell us the truth before this gets worse. A long, tense beat. Then Brandon exhaled. Look, He ran a hand through his hair. I wasn't doing anything illegal, okay? Navarro cut him off. Then why is your IP address linked to a network breach involving multiple homes? Brandon froze. Melanie's voice broke. Brandon, please tell me you're not involved in this. His eyes darted to her, and for the first time his mask cracked. I didn't mean for it to get this far, he muttered. It started as a joke. I wanted to see if I could get into someone's Wi-Fi just to mess with them. Navarro's voice was sharp. So you admit you hacked into the network? Brandon hesitated, then he nodded. Melanie's breath caught in her throat. Brandon kept going, voice faster now. It was just supposed to be a prank, but then I saw the security cameras and I got curious. Carter's eyes narrowed. Curious or obsessed? Brandon didn't answer. Navarro's patience ran out. How many people have you watched? Silence. Then his voice dropped. I don't know. Melanie staggered back. Oh my God! Brandon looked at her. For the first time, real regret crossed his face. I swear I wasn't hurting anyone, he said. Navarro didn't let him finish. Brandon Foster, you're under arrest for unauthorized access of a computer network and unlawful surveillance. Brandon went pale. Wait, no! Carter was already pulling out her cuffs. Melanie turned away, covering her face as tears welled in her eyes. Amory had been right all along, and the worst part, she had called the cops on him when the real danger had been inside her house the whole time. But this wasn't over yet. Brandon didn't resist. He stood there, wrists bound in cuffs, staring at the floor as Navarro read him his rights. It was over. Melanie's breath was shaky. She couldn't even look at him. This was her nephew, the boy she had taken in, fed, supported, and he had been violating the privacy of their entire neighborhood. Navarro guided Brandon toward the door, but before stepping out, he turned to Amory, who had been watching from the sidewalk. You were right, Navarro admitted. If you hadn't caught this, we might have never known. Amory didn't say anything at first. He just let out a slow breath, looking between Brandon and Melanie. Then, finally, he spoke. You know what's crazy? His voice was calm, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. I was out here minding my business, changing my own Wi-Fi password, and yet somehow I was the one who got the cops called on me. Melanie flinched. She had no defense, because there was none. I was wrong, she murmured. I made an assumption, and it was completely unfair. Amory let that sit in the air for a moment. Then, shaking his head, he turned toward his house. I don't need an apology, he said over his shoulder. Just do better. And with that, he went inside. Navarro and Carter exchanged a look before leading Brandon toward the patrol car. Melanie stayed behind, standing alone in the middle of the street. The truth had been right in front of her all along, but she had been too busy looking at the wrong person. And that mistake, it would haunt her for a long, long, long time. Assumptions have consequences. Jumping to conclusions based on bias or paranoia can ruin innocent people's lives, while the real danger goes unchecked. Instead of making judgments without evidence, take a step back. Observe, listen. The truth might not be what you expect. If you found this story eye-opening, share it. You never know who needs to hear this lesson today.
Enough to cut through the tension. How do you even know Olivia's sending the money? Have you ever seen proof of it? My parents looked at her like she had grown a second head. My dad waved his hand. Dismissively, of course, Olivia wouldn't lie about something like that. She's been the responsible one since day one. Responsible, that word go like a slap to my face. I'd spent the last 6 months tightening my own budget just to help them out, skipping dinners out with friends and saying no to things I really wanted, all because I thought of the right thing to do. But no matter what I did, Olivia always managed to swoop in and make me look like the selfish one, just as I was. About to respond, the front door opened, and Olivia waltzed in, a bag of candy swinging from her hand. What's going on? She asked, her voice annoyingly cheerful, as if she hadn't just walked into the middle of a storm. She took one look at my mom's flushed face and my clenched fists and immediately put on her innocent act, tilting her head like she had no idea. What was happening? You need to explain to your sister, my mom said, pointing a shaky finger at me. She's trying to claim she's been helping us financially when we all know it's been you. Olivia froze for a moment, her eyes darting to me, then to Na, before putting on her most saccharine smile. Oh, Mom, she said with laugh, setting the candy on the camera. I'm sure Sophie just misunderstood. She turned me, her expression dripping with fake concern. You know, I've been handling this for months now. I didn't want to burden you with it. I stared at her, absolutely floored by her audacity. Misunderstood, I said, my voice trembling. I've been sending the money since July, every single month, and you knew that, Olivia. Don't you dare act like this was all a mix-up. Nina crossed her arms, glaring at Olivia. Yeah, Olivia, care to explain why you've been so quiet about it all this time? Olivia's fake smile faltered for just a second, but she recovered quickly, brushing her hair behind her like nothing had happened. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. I've been helping out because unlike you, I actually care about Mom and Dad's well-being, that was it. I felt something snap inside me. Are you serious right now? I shot back, standing up so fast my chair scraped loudly against the floor. You've been letting them believe a lie for months. Olivia, you knew I was the one sending the money, but you just sat there and let them think it was you. Why, so you could play the hero? Na stepped in before things got even more heated. Hold on, she said, raising her hand like a referee. There's an easy way to settle this. Did Olivia ever actually show you proof that she was sending the money? Bank statements, screenshots, anything? My parents exchanged awkward glances and my mom stammered, well, no, but we didn't think we needed to, Olivia said. She was doing it. Olivia whipped around to face Na, her smile now replaced with a glare. You're out of place here, Na. She snapped, her voice sharp and defensive. This is a family matter, and frankly, you don't know the first thing about what's been going on. Na didn't back down. Oh, I think I know enough. She shot back, her tone icy. I've watched you bask in the praise for something you didn't even do. Olivia, you've been feeding them lies, and you know it. Olivia let out a sarcastic laugh, shaking her head. You're unbelievable, she muttered, pulling out her phone. Fine, if you want proof here. She scrolled through her files, then held the screen up to my parents. See, these are the receipts for the transfers I've been making every month, like clockwork. My mom's face softened as she glanced at the PDFs, but I knew better. Step closer, my heart pounding. Let me see those, I said, snatching the phone from her hand before she could protest. The receipts looked convincing, her name, the amounts, even the transaction IDs, but something about them felt off. I turned to who leaned over to look with me. This is a lie, I exploded, my voice shaking the walls. The room went dead silent, but I couldn't stop you. Fake these, Olivia. Don't act like you've been sending them money when you haven't sent a single dime. My chest heaved as I glared at her, daring her to deny it. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not this time. Na, who had been so sharp just moments ago, suddenly stepped back, looking uncomfortable. I don't know, maybe I went too far, she muttered, avoiding Olivia's glare. She wasn't going to take sides anymore, not with the tenseness. Hi, Olivia just smirked, holding her phone close to her chest like it was some kind of shield. Fine, I snapped, pulling out my own phone. You want proof? I'll show my bank statements right now. My hands shook as I opened my banking app, only for the screen to freeze. No, I muttered under my breath, tapping furiously. It wasn't working. I closed it, reopened it, and tried again. Nothing come. Fun, I hissed, panic rising in my chest. It's not working. How convenient, Olivia said, smugly, her arms crossed. The one time you need to prove something, your phone just doesn't work. Sounds legit. Sophie, enough, my dad roared, standing up and towering over me. You've embarrassed yourself enough already. If you can't back up your story, your sister an apology right now. His tone was cold, final, and if you don't, you can pack your things and leave. I'm not letting you ruin Christmas. Your jealousy. I froze, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on me. Apologize for what? I spat, my voice cracking. For telling the truth, for being tired of living in her shadow. My dad just pointed to the door. You have 5 minutes to decide. I didn't wait. I grabbed my coat and walked out into the freezing night, slamming the door behind me. Tears blurred my vision. As I made my way to my car, I had never felt so small, so lost. Christmas was supposed to be about family, but all I could feel was how little I belonged in mine. I drove aimlessly through the dark, my tears blurring the Christmas light rung along the streets. My mind was racing, replaying the confrontation over and over. How could Olivia do this? How could my parents believe her without a second thought? I didn't even realize where I was going until I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour coffee shop. The bright lights inside felt oddly out of place against the stillness of the night. I grabbed my phone and slid into a booth, still trembling with anger and humiliation. My banking app stared back at me. Useless. Every time I tried to log in, I got the same frustrating message. We're experiencing a major technical issue. All services, including ATMs, are temporarily unavailable. We're working to resolve this as soon as possible. Thank you for your patience. I needed proof now. Refreshed the app again and again as if sheer willpower could force it to work. But it was no use. The universe had it out for me. Tonight, an hour passed. I was still staring at my phone, empty coffee cups scattered around me, when a message popped up. It was, nah, hey, are you okay? I've been thinking. And if you need a place to crash, my door is open. I'm not sure what to believe right now, but you've always been honest with me. Let me know. For the first time that night, I let out a shaky breath. Nah, believed me, or at least part of her did. She was torn, and I couldn't blame her. Olivia's so-called proof had been convincing enough, and with my app down, I had nothing. My word to fight back still gave me a small glimmer of hope. At least someone wasn't completely against me. My parents lived in a small town, the kind where everyone knows everyone else's business. I'd only come back for the holidays hoping for a quiet Christmas with family. Instead, I found myself driving through empty streets to Nina's house, clutching the steering wheel as if it could hold me together. When I pulled into her driveway, she was already at the door, wrapped in a blanket and holding a hug of tea. Come in, she said softly, her expression a mix of worry and hesitation. I stepped inside and she didn't press me to talk right away. She just handed me a mug and led me to the couch where I finally let out the breath I'd been holding since I walked out of my parents' house. I'm not lying, Nina, I said after a few minutes of silence. My voice cracked, but I forced myself to keep going. I swear to you I've been sending money every month since July. Olivia knew, and she let them think it was her. Those receipts she showed, they're fake. I know they are. Nah, nodded slowly, still unsure. I believe you, she said hesitantly, but you have to admit it doesn't look great right now, especially with the app not working. It's like the perfect storm. I know, I whispered, my frustration boiling over. But tomorrow, if the bank system is back up, I'll show them the proof I'm not stepping foot in that house for Christmas Day unless and prove Olivia's been lying. Nah, sat back, looking thoughtful. Everyone's gonna be there tomorrow, she said quietly. Your parents, Olivia, the whole family, if you walk in. And with proof, there's no way she can weasel her way out of it. Exactly, I said firmly. I'm not going to let her keep making me the bad guy, not anymore. Nah gave me a small encouraging smile. Well, you can stay here as long as you need to, and tomorrow, let's hope the bank system is back up. The next morning, I woke up feeling a sliver of hope, thinking maybe, just maybe, the universe had decided to cut me some slack. But as I reached for my phone and opened the bank app, my stomach dropped. The same message stared back at me. We're still experiencing a major technical issue. Services remain unavailable. Thank you for your patience, I groaned, running a hand through my messy hair. Still down, I muttered, tossing the phone onto the bedside table. For a moment, I just sat there staring at the ceiling, my mind racing for alternatives. How was I supposed to prove anything without access to my account? And I knocked softly on the door before peeking in. Morning, she said, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Her face fell when she saw mine. Still no luck, I shook my head, taking the mug from her. Nothing, I don't know what to do, Nina. I can't just walk there with my word against Olivia. I'll never believe me. She sat down beside me, tucking her legs under her. There's got to be another way, she said, thinking out loud. Can you call your bank? Maybe they can verify the transfer. The phone. I considered it for a moment, but knew it wouldn't work even if I called. The bank, my parents weren't going to let me sit there on the phone in front of them. They just dismissed it as another excuse. Besides, it was Christmas Day and all the bank branches were closed. Tried calling their customer line anyway, but all I got was an automated message: we are experiencing high call volumes due to a technical issue. Please try again. Later, I hung up, frustration boiling over. Everyone must have been calling for the same reason, and now I was completely stuck. I have to think of another way. Muttered more to myself than to Nina. Can't just show up empty-handed. Sitting at Nina's kitchen table, staring blankly at my coffee cup, completely stuck. Every option seemed like a dead. And there has to be a way, I mumbled more to myself than to Na, who was scrolling on her phone nearby. Something Olivia didn't think of when she faked those receipts. I picked up my phone for the 100th time, scrolling aimlessly through apps and emails, hoping for inspiration. That's when it hit me. The emails every time I made a transfer to my parents, I got an automatic confirmation email from the bank. Those wouldn't be tied to the app or the bank's current technical issues. I nearly dropped my phone as I scrambled to search my inbox. It didn't take long there. They were clear as day. Monthly mail confirmations from July through December, showing the exact amounts I transferred and the same account numbers linked to my parents. Nah, I practically shouted, spinning my phone around for her. See, look at this. The emails, they're all here. It's all the proof I need. And determination flooded through me. At the same time, Nina's eyes widened. She read over the emails, her face breaking into a smile. You've got her now, she said, her voice steady with confidence. There's no way Olivia can talk her way out of this. I nodded, my resolve firm. I'm going to that house, but only with this proof in hand. If she tries to deny it, I'll show them these emails right in front of everyone. For the first time in hours, I felt like I had control again. Olivia's lies were about to unravel, and this time, I wouldn't let her get away with it. As I stared at the confirmation emails, a wave of relief washed over me. But it was quickly followed by a twinge of embarrassment. How had I not thought of this earlier? It was so obvious. But then again, I hadn't been thinking clearly since last. I'd been too overwhelmed by the accusations and the sheer humiliation of being called a liar in front of everyone. My mind had been spinning in 100 directions, and honestly, I was just trying to hold it together. God, I muttered, shaking my head at myself. I feel so stupid for not checking my email sooner. It's been sitting there this whole time. Na reached over and squeezed my arm. Don't beat yourself up, she said gently. You've been through a lot in the past 24 hours. It's no wonder you didn't think of it right away. The important thing is that you found it. Now her reassurance helped ease some of the shame, though I still felt a little. Silly, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was coming. Next, okay, I said, sitting up later. I've got the proof, I'm going over there. And I'm setting the record shift. If they still don't believe me after this, then that's on them. Nah, nodded her. Expression firm, I've got your back. Sophie, let's go show them the truth. I pulled into my parents' driveway, gripping the steering wheel for a moment before stepping out the house decorated with twinkling lights, and a cheerful wreath on the door felt like a cruel joke. I was here to celebrate. I was here to expose the truth. Na gave me a small nod of encouragement before we both walked up to the door. My mom opened it, her face tight with disapproval. So you decided to come back, she said, her tone sharp enough to make me flinch. Behind her, Olivia was leaning casually against the wall, smirking. Did you come to apologize, Sophie? She asked, her voice dripping with mockery. My dad stood further back, arms crossed, looking like he'd rather slam the door in my face. I just want to celebrate Christmas with the family, I said softly, forcing my voice to sound apologetic. I don't want more drama. My mom narrowed her eyes, but stepped aside to let me in. Olivia let out a little snort as I her, whispering just loud enough for me to hear. Took you long enough to come. Crawling back, I clenched my fist, but kept my face neutral. Let her think I'd given up. Let them all think I was just here to brevel and move on. I along, smiling faintly and staying out of the way as the house slowly filled with relatives, cousins, aunts, uncles. They all greeted me warmly, none of them aware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. As we sat down for dinner, I felt my heart pounding in anticipation. I knew Olivia couldn't resist bringing up last night. It was only a matter of time before she used the moment to paint herself as the victim, and me as the villain. All I had to do was wait and make sure my proof was ready. It didn't take long for Olivia to seize the spotlight. As we all sat around the table, passing dishes and exchanging polite conversation, she cleared her throat dramatically while she began glancing at me with a smirk. I think we all need to address the elephant in the table. Went silent, all eyes turning toward her. She leaned back in her chair, Viking of concern. You know, last night was really tough for me, she said, her voice trembling just enough to seem genuine. I never thought Sophie could stoop so low as to accuse me of lying. It was honestly heartbreaking. My stomach twisted as whispers spread around the table. A few relatives were already glancing at me with disapproval, while others seemed too stunned to react. Olivia wasn't done. I've always tried to be there for this family, she continued, laying it on thick, sending money every month to help mom and dad, never asking for recognition, and for her to turn around and call me a liar in front of everyone, it's beyond hurtful. Her performance was flawless, tears threatening to spill, voice shaking just enough to sound sincere. My parents nodded along, my mom looking particularly wounded. You didn't deserve that, Olivia, she said, her voice firm. We've always known that you're the responsible one. The room with murmurs of agreement and the weight of their judgment pressing down on me. My cousins and aunts stared at me like I was the worst person in the world. I gripped my phone under the table, my pulse pounding in my ears. I had waited for this moment, but now that it was here, the pressure was suffocating. I took a deep breath, steadying my hands under the table as Olivia continued her act. She finally paused, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. I seized the moment. That's enough, I said, my voice calm but firm. Every head turned to me with surprise. Others, with outright disdain, stood gripping my phone tightly. You've had your chance to talk, Olivia. Now it's my turn, she scoffed, rolling her eyes. Oh, here we go again. I ignored her and addressed the table. Instead, I've been sending mom money every month since July. I don't use fancy speeches and I don't ask for recognition, but when Olivia stood there last night claiming she was the one doing it, I couldn't stay quiet, and now I can prove it. I held up my phone, showing the email confirmations. ID found. These are my receipts. They come directly from my bank. They show every transfer I made to mom and dad's account, along with the exact dates and amounts. Olivia leaned back, smirking. Oh, please, she said, waving me off. Anyone can fake an email these days. You really expect everyone to believe that my receipts came straight from the app? They're not fake. I shot back, my frustration boiling over. And if you're so confident, let's check the dates, Mom. Dad, did you bother to check the transfer dates on Olivia's receipts last night? Because I'll bet they don't match mine. And my parents exchanged uneasy glances. My dad shifted in his chair, scratching his chin. We didn't check, he admitted. We just assumed, and we don't use the bank app on our phones. You just assumed she was telling the truth. I finished for him, my voice sharp. You trusted her without a thought, but now you have a chance to see for yourselves. I crossed my arms, daring Olivia to interrupt. Latungo and check your ATM statements. They show the accounters. For every deposit, you don't need bank apps for that. Olivia's smirk faltered, but she quickly recovered. Fine, she snapped them. Check, I have nothing to hide. My parents hesitated. Uncomfortable. It's Christmas, my mom said weakly. Do we really have to? Yes, interrupted my voice unwillingly. Do reluctantly. My dad grabbed his coat, and the three of us left for the nearest ATM. The cold night air bit at my skin as we drove in tense silence at the ATM. My dad pulled out his card and asked the transaction history. Slowly he scrolled through the dates, matching them to the statements on my phone. The moment of truth came when he clicked into the details of a July deposit. It displayed the bank account number and it matched mine. He checked August, September, every single one lined up perfectly with the emails I'd shown them. My mom stared at the screen, her face pale. It's Sophie's account, she whispered. Barely audible, everyone's transfers came from Sophie. Olivia actually took the time to her statements just in case we would ask one. Day when we pulled back into the driveway, the atmosphere in the car was thick with tension. My parents hadn't said a word the entire ride home, their faces a mix of shame and disbelief as we walked into the house. The murmurs of conversation in the living room came to an abrupt halt. Eyes turned toward us, the situation pressing down on everyone. And then we saw Olivia. She was by the door furiously, throwing on her coat and clutching her purse. Her face was flushed, her confident smirk replaced by a panicked, guilty expression. Olivia, my dad said, stepping forward, we checked the statements every transfer came from Sophie's account. You've been lying to us. The room erupted into hushed gasps. A few relatives exchanged awkward glances, clearly embarrassed. Have believed her. One by one, they started gathering their things, mumbling hurried goodbyes as they shuffled the door. Olivia's facade finally cracked. She let out a bitter laugh, tears streaming down her face. Fine, she snapped, spinning around to face us. Yes, I lied. Okay, is that what you want to hear? I lied. She glared at me, her face trembling with frustration. You told me back in July that you didn't want a big deal made about sending them money, that you just wanted to help quietly. So I thought, what's the harm in letting them think it was me? They already see me as the responsible one anyway. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I told you because I trusted you, I said, my voice shaking. I thought maybe for once you'd support me. Instead, you used it to make yourself look good while I was left feeling invisible. Do you even realize how humiliating this has been for me? Olivia's expression softened for a brief moment, but she quickly turned defensive. Again, they were never going to believe you over me, Sophie, she said bitterly. I didn't think it would blow up like this. My mom stepped forward, her voice trembling. Why, Olivia? Why would you do this? We would have been grateful to either of you for helping. There was no reason for this. Olivia didn't respond. She grabbed her keys and stormed out the door, slamming it behind her. The room was silent for a long moment, the weight of her actions sinking in. My parents turned to me, their faces filled with regret. Sophie, my dad began, his voice heavy. We owe you an apology, a huge one. We should have listened to you. We didn't, and we're sorry. My mom nodded, tears streaming down her face. We've treated you unfairly for so long, and this was inexcusable. I don't know if we can ever make it up to you, but we'll try. Promise. I stood there, taking their words, unsure how to feel. Part of me wanted to forgive them, but another part still ached from years of being overlooked. I appreciate the apology, said finally, my voice quiet, but this doesn't erase everything it's going to take time. They nodded solemnly, and for the first time I felt like they truly understood. The night ended quietly after that, with the house emptied of guests and the three of us in the lingering aftermath. It wasn't the Christmas I had hoped for, but at least for once the truth was out and I wasn't the bad guy anymore.